Greetings from frigid Toronto, Ontario, Canada, where it is currently a balmy -2 degrees Celsius. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani. This is the UFC 206 MMAfighting.com preview show. That is the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall. Of course, we are standing outside the ACC, the Air Canada Centre, here in the 6th, site of tomorrow night's big Ultimate Fighting Championship card. It has changed once again. Remember, originally it was Daniel Cormier versus Anthony Johnson for the light heavyweight title. Then it became Anthony Pettis versus Max Holloway for the interim featherweight title. And now it's just Max Holloway versus Anthony Pettis for the interim title. And I emphasize Max Holloway because if he wins tomorrow night, he becomes the interim featherweight champion. But as a result of Anthony Pettis missing weight earlier today, he weighed in at 148. 3 pounds over the featherweight limit. As a result of this, he cannot win the interim featherweight title tomorrow night if he beats Max Holloway. So the belt is only on the line for one fighter. That fighter is Max Holloway. What a strange scenario, Chuck Mindenhall. How did we get here? It was so weird going into this, and now it just got a whole lot weirder. Make sense of it for us.
It's almost like Week 17 NFL playoff scenarios. You're going through all these different things. No, I was talking to some journalists earlier, and we were talking about, like, if you're a casual fan and you're looking in at this sport, this particular event, just how confusing it would actually be. Just given the nature of it was supposed to be a light heavyweight title fight, which then switched to an interim featherweight title with McGregor's whole thing that went on, and now we're talking about a conditional interim title for Max Holloway because of the weight thing, and the weight thing happened in the official weigh-ins in the morning. Not the this whole thing. If you're just a casual fan, it's just very, very bizarre set of circumstances. But ultimately, I guess when you have to really look at it, you have to be a little bit happy that they're still keeping a belt on the line in some way, since they were going to do that to begin with. It would be a lot different, I guess, especially from Max Holloway's perspective, if he was punished in this scenario for Anthony not making the weight. So a lot of shifting going on, a lot of complicated stuff. But ultimately, I guess for Max Holloway, it's about the same thing.
This will be Anthony Pettis' 25th pro fight. It will mark the first time that he has missed weight going into a fight. Also, just the second time he's fought at featherweight. You were there for his featherweight debut back in August. Should this mark the end of his featherweight run?
It's funny because when I saw him in Vancouver, he was walking around, he looked pretty bad. He was very gaunt, and this was like, a couple days before the fight, and I thought, this is a mistake. It just seemed too extreme for him to get down to that weight. But then he goes out there, and he has a pretty good fight against Charles Oliveira. He looked good. He was able to weather the storm and come back, and I didn't really feel like he suffered too many repercussions from his weight cut. So I kind of put it behind me, and then you get into this scenario, and, all week it's been reassuring that he's going to make the weight. I felt like his camp was very confident he would make the weight. He still looked very gaunt, though. He still looked like he did in Vancouver, and then he doesn't. At this point, it's too dangerous a game. It's an outdated thing to play with your weight, and I was happy to hear that he just gave it up rather than keep pursuing it, because honestly, man, it's just an outdated way of thinking to try to kill yourselves to make the weight. The casualties in this game particularly, I feel like come down to guys who play around with their weight too much, more so than the dangers in the cage.
And now you have a situation where you have Holloway and Pettis, who were the two best guys after Aldo and McGregor. But if Pettis wins, do you give him the Aldo fight, or do you say we can't reward you because you failed to make weight?
This is one of those strange situations, and it's going to be a gamble. I mean, obviously, putting Pettis in a 145-pound fight, which would be a mega fight, I guess, with Aldo. I know when they first tried to book it a couple years ago, it was like a super fight. And if you're going to be gambling pretty hard if you're going to say, hey, I think both these guys are going to be able to make that weight, and we're going to have it as it is. But it's a gamble we're taking ultimately, I think, especially if Pettis goes in here and he's able to just go right through Max Holloway and looks good. You are marketing this as the next guy's going to get Aldo. It was trying to free up traffic in the division. I think if he goes in there, you have to gamble on it and put that fight together at this point. I just feel like people would want to see it, and you just got to hope that he makes the weight.
Okay, so this is what I'm wondering. Who were you picking before all of this weigh-in madness? And does today kind of influence what you're thinking will happen tomorrow?
Man, I've been leaning Holloway the whole way, and I think I'm still there. I don't know. Part of it is, I guess, that, Pettis, he didn't look the same. He was fighting very tough guys at 155 when he lost that 3-fight streak. They're very good fighters he was fighting. But I still felt like he didn't have the fire in him ultimately. And he came back, and I thought he looked pretty good against Oliveira, but I'm not all the way sold, and I just think that Max Holloway just turned 25. I feel like the guy believes he's there, believes he's invincible, and probably the best he's been fighting ever. And so I just think he's going to prove too much. And he wants it more at this point. You know, he's never had a belt. I feel like he looks at this as a legitimate chance for him to shine, to have the belt, to put himself against Aldo in all the scenarios he's been after.
Yeah, you have to wonder what kind of physical state Anthony Pettis is in right now after telling me earlier today that he was gagging and feeling lightheaded and acid reflux. I mean, not an easy road to get to this point. Do you think that Holloway gets the finish? He's looked fantastic. Do you think he can do it?
I think he can for sure. He can do it, but I mean, ultimately, this thing became a 5-round fight. I thought that was one of the interesting, twists to this thing, and it plays two ways. Well, Pettis is, he's been a champion. He's dealt in 5-round training for a lot of his career, and how does Holloway handle it? But I still think at 25 years old, and given that I felt like he really was in control of his own weight cut and just handling himself, and he looks in great shape, I just think he'll be able to, if he doesn't get a finish, I think he'll make it his fight all the way through the championship rounds.
Okay, let's move along. No love lost between Donald Cerrone and Matt Brown. Cerrone continues to try to extend a hand to Matt Brown. Matt Brown wants none of it, calling him a bully, calling him a disrespectful martial artist, not honorable, all these things. And I'm wondering about both of their mental states going into this fight. For Donald, it's been a bit of a rocky road. Supposed to fight in New York, didn't happen. Part of this association, gets called out by Dana White, backtracks a little bit, his eye issue, and then you have Matt Brown, who's coming off that brutal loss to Jake Ellenberger. I'm just wondering where both of these guys will be. Who do you expect to look better in this fight, considering all of that?
That's a tough question. I mean, Cerrone has looked so good at 170 pounds that you start to fall for the trance of being like, well, he's always going to look this good because he sets up these sequences of events where he just wins like this, and he's definitely in that spot now. This is a little bit different circumstance, obviously, because he's going to fight one way, and there is all this extra baggage around him. It's very odd watching this whole thing, even showing up on stage with his UFC hat. Just kind of, I don't know. It feels odd to kind of see him go through this whole thing. But Matt Brown, to me, has that chip on his shoulder, and the times I've seen him kind of like that in the past, I always feel like you get a good version of him, and he seems like he's digging deep like he did a few years ago when he lost 4 or 5, very similar situation, and then he went on that 7-fight win streak. I'm not saying he can do that again. He's obviously been in so many wars at this point. I don't know if he could do that again, but having that chip on his shoulder, I almost have to start leaning towards Matt Brown in that one.
I just love the fact that you're actually here covering a Matt Brown fight in person. So officially we're going with the Immortal one?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with that. I mean, it's
shocker.
It's great. Well, Cerrone has looked really good, and it's going to be a tough fight. But I feel like Matt Brown's going to lay it all out there. I mean, it's been fun watching him this week. I mean, he's talking about being a pro in sports. He's the one not shaking hands. He's the one just kind of not making it cordial. So, anyways, I like this version of Matt Brown, and I think it'll translate.
The UFC very high on the Korean Superboy Choy. He is fighting Cub Swanson, 3 straight big-time finishes in the UFC. He looks like he's 4, but he punches like a grown man. Are you as high on Choy as the UFC is?
Well, I feel like this is the true test, right? Like you get a guy like Cub Swanson who's been around, going back to WC, just had that name, and I feel like this is the one time we're going to see it. But if he goes right through Cub Swanson, I would completely believe this. I didn't really think he'd be able to do that to Thiago Tavares either, and he was able to make it. I mean, each one of his fights has lasted incrementally longer. It's like the first one was like 18 seconds, then it was like a minute, and then it's like 2 minutes. So maybe Cub can last into a 3-minute mark or something. No, but I do feel like this is the one that he could make, being on a nice pay-per-view where he's getting a good spotlight like this. He could use Cub as a springboard. It's one of those weird situations because I feel like Cub Swanson is a guy who's been a fighter's fighter and kind of like one of those figures, very likable guy in the sport, and he still is. But now he's positioned in the spot where almost like Barberina, going back to that fight with Sage Northcutt, where you're like, your job now is to disrupt this narrative we're trying to build around this guy coming up, and it's a tough spot to be in. But I feel like Cub Swanson's not too worried about it.
And so who are you picking?
Man, I went back and forth on this one too. I'm gonna go with Cub Swanson ultimately. I just think that when you get these guys, these veterans, and they're able to kind of, especially given his camp and who he trains with, and the guys know what they're looking at. I feel like he'll be able to to probably expose something and that we haven't seen in the Superboy's game. I just think that his veteran, the veteran side is going to shine through and he'll get it done. And
I know this card has been much maligned, and I'm not biased because it's taking place in Canada, but it is chock full of great storylines. Yeah. And another one is the Tim Kennedy-Kelvin Gastelum fight. I mean, you talk about going into a fight with a lot of baggage. Tim Kennedy's supposed to fight in New York, retired, came back, continually criticizes the UFC, is sort of the face of this association, if you will, or at least the mouth of it. Has no problems criticizing the UFC while he's here. Kevin Gastelum, missing weight, is forced to go up to 185, said that he was fearful for his life. I mean, there's so much going on with this fight in particular. And then the stare down, they were going forehead to forehead. Cool. Who's your pick in this one?
Man, tough one. You're right about Tim Kennedy. It's a crazy, unnerving fellow he is. But he's also like hunting Nazis down in...
Hunting Hitler. I mean, who knows what this guy's up to?
I think I ultimately lean towards Kennedy. He's had a long break, but I feel like he's so, honed in this weird way, because I feel like for him, he's got to be distracted. It's funny, like it's almost like fighting for him is the actual hobby to all of his other crazy things he has going on in his life. But he to me feels very loose. He looks like he's in great shape, and he wanted that fight really badly in New York. I mean, he was already out there, and I feel like I think he'll get it done. Very tough guy, Kevin Gass, but I'm going to go with Kennedy on this.
And then you wonder what he'll say on the mic if he gets it afterwards. Yeah. What message will Tim Kennedy have for the UFC? That's just as intriguing in my opinion. Okay, let's round it out. Jordan Meehan making his return almost 2 years away from the game after losing Thiago Alves. He retires, comes back. He's still babyface, still looks like he's, an 18-year-old newcomer. Mike Bond, he looks like Mike Bond, and he is facing your boy Emil Mech, who's being told now that he has to trim his signature beard, can't come out with the axe. I mean, his whole world is turned upside down for the Norwegian Valhalla Emil Mech. What are you expecting out of this fight?
Another really good one with all kinds of crazy intrigue, because you got a guy debut and just beat Paul Harris, who I think most people thought he was going to get smoked in that. I don't think people knew who he was, but he goes in there and knocks him out in 45 seconds. And then you get Jordan coming back after 2 years, and we thought he was retired. And he's always been sort of an enigma in this game too, just very, strange, somewhat antisocial guy. And here he is back. I'm ultimately going to go with the experience on this. I kind of went back and forth. I know. I'm sorry. I told the Norwegian TV I was going with with Valhalla.
Classic.
But upon reflection, I don't know. There's something about Meehan's demeanor that I'm like, I just feel like he wants it. He wants it more, and he's had a lot of experience, obviously. And I think he's a good stylistic matchup. I think this is a good stylistic matchup for him. So I'm gonna pick him.
All right. That does it for us. We can hardly feel our faces at this point, but we did it just for you, our loyal fans. We appreciate you watching our coverage up until this point of UFC 206. Trust me when I say this. Yes, it's missing that sexy fight at the top, the big title fight, if you will. But this main card is not one to be slept on. A lot of storylines, a lot of great fighters, a lot of great matchups. And don't forget also about Nikita Krylov versus Misha Cirkunov. There are a ton of great fighters on this card tomorrow night, going down right here at the Air Canada Centre in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. It's UFC 206, and we'll be back on Saturday night for our usual post-fight coverage. For now, we'll say goodnight. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on Saturday night.